God have mercy on us all.
Did I screw that up?
And you can get Listen Up for only $14.99.
I wanted to invite you guys, and thanks, Jonathan, for joining us, too. I wanted to help just get the word out because, you know, I was kind of joking around with some guys in Georgia a week or so ago about Hurricane Helene kind of making its way, look like it might go through Georgia. And, of course, being on the Gulf Coast here in Houston or Louisiana, we get these things a lot. We've dealt with some big ones. I had no idea this thing was going to be as big or as bad or as long-standing. Now, even now, you're past sort of the initial stuff, which I want y'all to talk about. But now up in Tennessee and North Carolina, you see the flooding with these rivers knocking out roads and bridges and people being cut off, and the death toll is mounting. So you guys were on the dirty side of the storm, is my understanding. Talk a little bit about the hurricane coming through and what you've seen, where you are, so people kind of get a sense not only where you are, but how all this has affected where you are and places beyond you as well.
Yeah, this is our second hurricane in 6 weeks. 6 weeks ago, we had Hurricane Debbie that came through and just dumped torrential rains on the area. And so we saw all kind of flooding across southeast region. Here in Statesboro, we saw Hagan Beach be completely washed away. We got to see dams overflow and burst, things we had never seen before whenever we have done ministry here. And so we're responding to that crisis. And then, you know, now Hurricane Helene's come through. And from all accounts that we've heard, this is the greatest impact from a storm that Bullitt County has ever had, highest winds we've ever had, greatest number of power outages we've ever had. So this is an unprecedented event for Bullitt County.
And for people who just to clarify, Bullitt County is just to the west of Savannah area, inland about maybe, 45 minutes or so as the crow flies.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, due west of Savannah. County has 85, close to 90,000 folks. Home to Georgia Southern University.
Georgia Southern, my alma mater.
Yeah. The wind gust early Friday morning as the storm comes through got up to about 80 miles an hour. It's the most we've had. And again, as you're sharing, Debbie was rain for 2 days, and this was wind for 2 hours, and they're very different events.
Very different. Very different. Where we had lots of standing water everywhere, here we have trees down everywhere. I mean,
I've circled the county in my car one day looking for cell service. I mean, we can talk about just the massive loss of infrastructure, but if I've seen 1,000 trees down, if I've seen 500 power lines or cable lines, it's unlike anything I've seen before.
Yeah, and for people to, you know, it's really different because with us, you know, on the coast, usually we're getting that direct hit. The direct hit was down in what's called the Big Bend of Florida area, the Apalachicola, between there and Tampa, and that's kind of not a real built-up area. Then it came through Tallahassee and kind of moved a little east. So you guys are a long way away from the landfall in Florida. And then the power outage map, though, goes all the way from Florida through Georgia and south of North Carolina into Tennessee and even Virginia.
Yeah, Southern Company that is a large utility provider, electricity provider. I mean, they've described the millions of homes that were initially without power, and they've been working really hard. And then local electricity companies like EMCs and things like that, they're bringing in people from all over, but the scale. Let me say that for a second. The scale is unlike what we've seen. There's a lot in Bullitt County, but East Georgia, you're describing like landfall in the bend of Florida, but then it moved pretty directly to Valdosta, which was not what it was predicted in the previous few hours, and then it makes this big arching turn in East Georgia, comes around the north end of Athens. Of course, we know the devastation that's happened in Western North Carolina and the community of Asheville and all those other communities, and then it does a circle in Tennessee. And as you described, it's the right hand side of the wall, you know, of the center of a hurricane that's got the strongest winds and the most rain. So what we see in East Georgia is that a town like Statesboro is getting a lot of attention, but there are 100 communities that don't have the infrastructure that Bullitt County does or Statesboro does that have the devastation or more.
More. As we move from Statesboro toward Augusta, which is northeast of here, it's just utter devastation. They've had unprecedented impact in Augusta as well. A lot of North Georgia Conference resources have been deployed that direction to help with the need there.
Yeah, just looking up the death toll. It is interesting, as many hurricanes as we get here, this death toll is 143 as of just 43 minutes. Those 3 more additional deaths in South Carolina. But there's 25 in Georgia, 36 in South Carolina, 56 in North Carolina, and they're still looking for people. One of the things we talked about this morning in our staff worship is in our United Methodist denomination. One of the things that Will Willimon talks about in his book on United Methodist beliefs is that when his definition or understanding of our theology of the church is we're a connectional church. And so here we are in Houston, and we're thinking about everybody over there, but we're connected to you all. We're connected to you as United Methodists. And when we go through things like this, we react and we respond to everybody in the community, not just the United Methodists. What are you hearing over there? Are the things that are happening? It may be really soon now as far as organization and strategy and actions. But one of the things I want to make sure before we get out of here today is like, what's going on? What are the needs? And what are ways that resources can be directed or things that we can lift up to communicate to people if they want to help? How can they be helpful?
Yeah, we've made it through the first 72, now 96 hours of the storm and the recovery from the storm. People's immediate needs were shelter, food, and water. And we've been able to provide that. Here at Pittman Park, we've been able to assist about 1,200 citizens. We provided hot meals daily. We've done like 700 showers. We've got an Umpor shower trailer that's just behind the camera here. That we've been using nonstop. That thing has been the rock star of this.
It is the hero.
Yes, the hero of this recovery effort. A hot shower gives people so much hope. Then we opened up our fellowship hall to be a place where people could just sit in some AC because we never lost power here, plug in their phones to communicate with their family, and then share their stories, talk about what they've experienced so they can let off, some of the weight of what they've experienced in these last few weeks. One of the things we've done for the next few weeks of recovery is we've set up a fund here at the church, which will become a separate 501c3 in time, called Bullock Strong. You can go to bullockstrong.com and you can donate directly to helping Bullitt County recover from this storm. And again, we're going to focus on food, we're going to focus on water, we're going to focus on shelter when it comes to those long-term recovery efforts. So bullockstrong.com, that's a partnership with Bullock BOAD volunteers organized to assist in disaster, Feed the Borough, which has fed like 2.5 million people meals over the past few years. And we're just excited about the community partnership and the potential to be here for the long haul. Because as Methodists, our connectional nature allows us to be present in the midst of tragedy for a long time. We've been able to call on resources from all around the state and all around the nation even to support.
Yeah, and I'll brag on Jonathan and his wife, Stephanie. They're both United Methodist clergy that serve here at Pittman Park. But it was actually the city and community that came to Pittman Park yesterday in a rush and said, we're ready to start receiving funds, but we can't do it without a 501c3 that'll set up an account. Can you do that? And Jonathan, within 5 minutes, has an account going. This has been a hub for the way this community is getting cared for. And you listed some of the services, but the magnitude of what's happening here in this little piece of property through the church, and it happens to be a United Methodist church, which happens to be a connectional church, but it can be any church. The church just has to do it.
Yeah.
You just
The courage to say,
and your volunteers have stepped up. They're the heroes.
They're the heroes. They came out right at the first call, and really not even a call. We just said, we're going to open the church, and they showed up. And for 72 hours, they were on site and present. Yesterday, we knew that they were getting a little weary, so we called on Georgia Southern University. The athletic director, Jared Benko, is a good friend, and he's been athletic teams out here. We've got the tennis team on site right now.
This is the college tennis team, Division I tennis team. We've had women's soccer, men's soccer, some football players, basketball players, baseball. Yeah, baseball.
Tonight, volleyball is going to be coming out to help us reset for the next day. A track and field. I mean, whenever they realized that we needed help, the university stepped in, and they've been a hero for us in the last 24 hours.
Without sounding like, just a doddering old preacher, the teachable moment for the local church is the community that's not impacted wants to help the community that is, but they need a place or a vehicle to do it. Yeah. And if a local church will just say, we'll be that place, people will show up. And y'all have seen this in Houston too. Y'all have been impacted. It's just in East Georgia right now.
Yeah.
My thought is, what are some ways that people can engage with those stories that are happening? Is that being posted on social media where people can go and see and be inspired by that?
We haven't really been collecting stories because we've been hair on fire here, all hands on. Yeah. There's been some really good coverage through a website called Christ Connect that does local news here in Statesboro. WSAV, WTOC, which are Savannah news stations, have been out here to collect stories as well. They've got some good information there.
The clearinghouse for the best coverage of what happens in the South Georgia Annual Conference is, of course, our conference website run by our friend and John, your friend too, Kelly Robertson, Director of Communications. So that's sgaumc.com. And let me say, Paula Lewis, my colleague on the cabinet, Jay Harris, they're right now in a different part of South Georgia working. Anecdotal story, but one of the superintendents got a call from a community. I hadn't told you this. Got a call from a community this morning that said, no one knows how much need there is right here. We don't have food in our town. Wow. And so they called another DS, and he and his wife bought a couple $1,000s worth of food. They put it in their car, and they drove it 3 hours to actually begin feeding people and setting up a ministry to feed a community. That's the level and the scale, the magnitude of what's happened here. Is there's more that needs to happen. And so, of course, supporting, you talked about here locally. bullockstrong.com. But if you'll give money to the United Methodist Committee on Relief, if you'll help the Red Cross, because everybody's partnering together.
Yeah.
And
really
looking
the
up,
long haul.
I was just looking up SGA UMC. So if you just type whatever the state is, and then just in a Google search, like if you put North Carolina UMC or South Carolina UMC, it'll direct you to the conference websites. And I just saw that Kelly has an article up of just a lot of things that you all are doing across the South Georgia Conference, and I'm sure that other conferences have the same things going on. And I'm also here looking at bullockstrong.com, long-term recovery. Yeah, those things are. It's just interesting because you think of South Georgia where you are. There's been tornadoes. You get tornadoes sometimes. But this is. I wouldn't say it's new. I mean, you had a hurricane that dumped some rain, but what you're dealing with is pretty unique for that. I mean, I spent a lot of time over there. I don't remember us having. I remember the Hugo Bowl in 1988 at Georgia Southern, where ESPN was on TV at night, where Hurricane Hugo came through the stadium, and I wore a trash bag walking back to my dorm. But that was just a lot of rain and a little wind. It was not anything like what we're talking about, this swath of power lines, trees, no cell service. I read an article where in North Carolina, like one of the main cell towers that supports the other cell towers was washed out into the sea. And then you see these rivers flooding in North Carolina, washing out roads, and there's no access. This is pretty unique in the amount of just territory it's impacting. And so you guys are just representing. Well, Jonathan, you're there in Statesboro and in Bullock County. Scott, you're over like the coastal areas. How are other coastal cities faring in Georgia, for example?
Yeah, so many folks would know Savannah that follow your podcast. First place, John Wesley landed in the new colonies. Savannah's been they've been hit hard with this storm. I mean, half the city didn't have power, struggling to keep up with that. And of course, you know, when you don't have power, then if you had internet, your router Wi-Fi is not going to work. If you don't have power, then either your well service or the local neighborhood water service. And so power is where it all begins. And I mean that's the story for all these communities. I'll tell you, John, my son Sam got in the car the other night to drive from Statesboro to Atlanta to watch the Braves win against the Royals. He said the first hour, now let this sink in. He said the first hour on the interstate, there was no cell signal for an hour. And I'm going,
and that's where you get the best cell signal is I-16.
Well, I mean, every interstate in America, all the networks brag. I mean, we've got you know, cell service on the interstates, and it's just the towers are down, probably because they don't have power and the generators had run out of fuel. It's pretty widespread. But I will say it's nice when you're impacted to know that there are people like y'all. There are other folks that are willing to help out. Some folks are happy to write a check, and then some are like, I want to actually give something tangible. Jeff, you were asking, you know, how can folks help? If you'll go and Google UMCOR, we keep tossing it out, UMCOR. If you go Google UMCOR cleaning bucket, you'll find instructions there.
Yes.
How many cleaning buckets did you give away 6 weeks ago in that previous storm?
I mean, we probably gave away 2,000 flood buckets. And for years, Pittman Park and First Methodist here in town, we've had little drives, and we would send away 100, 50 buckets at a time.
Youth group will make 14 buckets, and they're so proud. But those things come in clutch.
Yeah.
When a home has seen waters rise, and you need bleach and you need scrubbing kind of devices.
I had a call from a former student at Georgia Southern, where I was the Wesley Foundation director. Called me. She is now the assistant youth director at Oak Grove UMC in the North Georgia Conference, and said, "Hey, we just packed 1,500 hygiene bags. Do you think you guys could use them?" And it's like, you know, praise God, but I think we're okay on the hygiene side. You know, I can connect you with some other folks to be able to distribute those. But it's those little efforts, you know, over time by the connection that really make a difference in these moments.
Yeah, the people do step up and respond. We've seen it here, whether it was Hurricane Harvey. The people who are blessed enough to not be flooded or to have power, you know, really want to help and to do something. So I would also say the United Methodist Committee on Relief, UMCOR, as you said, you can direct to United States Disaster Response, and we'll have information here in the show notes, Jeff. We can put links for people who follow all of that. I will say, having been through that, it's interesting because what UMCOR does, we've seen this firsthand. They come in and do a lot of grants with local established nonprofits. So, for example, what you guys are doing in Bullock County, they'll be able to go and say, okay, you're already organized. You're doing ABC or whatever, XYZ. You put a proposal grant together and they just send you the money. And then you're basically getting that money into the ground as quickly as possible. It's not run through, you know, some national organization. The other good thing about UMCOR, which I always love, is that because of our connectional system as United Methodist, we take up an offering every year that covers all of the administrative expenses for UMCOR, so that when you give to UMCOR, all of that money is going to help with relief. And most people don't know that. So we just wanted to make sure, check in with you guys and kind of see how you're doing here from the ground, but also really point people in directions to be helpful. Because I think all across the United States, whenever these things happen, people are like, I want to help. We get that here. As soon as something happens, we get an email or a call. It's like, how can I donate? How can I help them? So we're promoting all of that now here, but I wanted to make sure that other people beyond Houston, anyone who listens to this podcast, gets a chance to hear from you two, and also provide the resources and maybe the conference links for all the other places that are going on as well. Anything else, y'all? Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned earlier the good that's coming out of our general conference and our jurisdictional conferences is that the United Methodist Church is getting right sized, and we're positioning ourselves to reach generations well into the future. We've talked about that, but even reaching communities and leveraging the way to reach communities in the immediate. So South Georgia got a new bishop. Has it been a month now? It's September 1st. And so Bishop Robin Dees, and she's come in and she said, hey, we've got 2 annual conferences in the state of Georgia, but we can leverage all those resources in the immediate, in the right now. And so thanks to not just the folks in South Georgia who are helping communities, but North Georgia shows up. Their disaster expert is Scott Parrish, and he's helping ours, Kelly Crane. And so again, it's delightful to sit down and or stand here and talk to John and Jeff and you guys and understand what it means to be the church that's connected together.
We want to be centers for resiliency, centers for hope for our community. And this is just one small way that we get to practice what we preach when it comes to being the hands and feet of Christ.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I'll say when you talk about starting a 501c3, our personal experiences when Harvey came, we, with a couple of other churches, started a group called the TRT, Restoration Team. Mm-hmm. And it was primarily just to go and muck homes but it morphed into now it's its own 501c3 disaster relief support for people in homes and fixing people's homes when they can't fix our homes and all this sort of stuff. So it's sometimes birthed out of a difficult situation or a disaster like this, but it can also become something that's there for the community in the future as well. So that's a great way for the local community to step up and support. Anything else you guys want to share with people?
No, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't say praise Jesus for all the grace he's given us, and even the grace for the long relationship we've had with you, John, and what you mean to us and to so many folks in South Georgia.
Well, I love South Georgia. Everybody in Texas knows that. Yeah, I got up to preach Sunday, and some guy yells out, "How about them dogs?" And I was like, "Come on, dude, that's not very nice to start the sermon with that." I mean, I didn't think that was very nice, but
I saw on Saturday night an opportunity for my Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets come Thanksgiving week. We'll see how that goes.
Hey, Georgia Tech looks pretty good this year. They got the Texas A&M's old quarterback, Haynes King. Yeah. We need to start a sports podcast, Scott.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's much national interest in sports.
A lot of people don't know this about Scott Hagan, but he was the manager for the basketball team at Georgia Tech when Bobby Crimmins was there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you got to see some good basketball back in the day.
That was in another century.
That wasn't another century. That was back when you had hair.
I did have hair. It's cut right here.
You did. I remember. Well, you guys, thanks for joining us just for a little bit. I know y'all are busy and a lot of stuff going on to coordinate, but I really thank you for taking time, and I know other people appreciate that as well. Y'all keep up the good work and let us know how we can be helpful.
John.
All right, buddy. See y'all. Well, Jeff, thanks for sitting in today, and I appreciate Scott and Jonathan coming and just kind of updating us, at least in that one area. You don't think about rural South Georgia. It's considered rural. It's a college town. But it's inland off the coast of the Atlantic. And, of course, if you look at it on the map, you'd think, oh, well, they'd never get hit bad by a hurricane. Yeah. And it got hammered by this thing. And same with these inland South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. That's not the kind of they don't usually get the bad hurricane stuff like this. So this thing was unique.
They don't have the infrastructure probably either for all that.
What you're seeing in North Carolina and Tennessee are these rivers, so much rain. Kind of like when we were in Harvey and the reservoirs, they release the water from the reservoirs. It's a little different in the sense that these rivers they can't control the water. Right. So what happens is when gets so powerful. If you've ever driven through North Carolina or Tennessee, sometimes the road or the highway will be right along a river, right? Mm-hmm. It'll sort of mirror the side of the river. Well, if that thing comes up and washes out the road,
Right.
that road's gone.
Right.
And some of them are interstates, highways, or county roads, or bridges. And, I'm here in like Asheville, North Carolina, was under a large part underwater. Now there's mud, and you can't get in and out without flying in. That's not something people who live in those areas
Right.
think about
Right.
ever happening to them. But
It's like
anyway.
during the winter apocalypse when we didn't have any snow plows or salt for the roads. Nobody can get around. We
in
just don't-
Houston, why don't y'all just break out your snow equipment? Yeah,
yeah,
we'll do that.
we'll do that.
My snow equipment is a shovel in my garage. That's about all it is. Well, hey, thanks for sitting in today, and make sure you subscribe and like the podcast. And I would think, especially this one, share with people who may be asking or looking for things to be helpful. This is like in this one little snapshot, some friends that I had real quick that I knew had gotten hit. We think we could go have a conversation with them. But man, this is all over kind of the East Coast, Southeast. So there's 100 stories like this, but I thought if we could get somebody on here quick and talk about that, it'd be helpful. So
great.
Make sure you share it with other folks if they want to learn ways that they can be helpful as well. All right. I'm John Stevens.
I'm Jeff Wood.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.